Hi, I'm Essie Cupp, and I've spent my career interviewing people about politics, presidential elections, and some really tough breaking news. But now I need a break, and I think you do too. So on my new podcast, Off the Cup, I'll still be interviewing people, usually famous and most likely my friends, but about life. You know, the stuff that consumes us when we're not consumed by politics. So come join me every Wednesday for some conversational self-care. Listen to Off the Cup on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your favorite shows.
Hey, I'm Gianna Prudenti.
And I'm Jermaine Jackson Gadsden. We're the hosts of Let's Talk Offline from LinkedIn News and iHeart Podcasts.
There's a lot to figure out when you're just starting your career. That's where we come in.
Think of us as your work besties you can turn to for advice.
And if we don't know the answer, we bring in people who do, like negotiation expert Maury Taheri-Pour.
If you start thinking about negotiations as just a conversation, then I think it sort of eases us a little bit.
Listen to Let's Talk Offline on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Want to know how to leverage culture to build a successful business? Then Butternomics is the podcast for you. I'm your host, Brandon Butler, founder and CEO of Butter ATL. And on Butternomics, we go deep with today's most influential entrepreneurs, innovators, and business leaders to peel back the layers on how they use culture as a driving force in their business. Butternomics will give you what you need to take your game to the next level. Listen to Butternomics on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
There's a lot of talk about mindfulness these days, which is fantastic. I mean, we all want to be more present and self-aware, more patient, less judgmental. We discuss all these themes on the podcast, but it's hard to actually be mindful in your day-to-day life. That's where Calm comes in. I've been working with Calm for a few years now with the goal of making mindfulness fun and easy. Calm has all sorts of content to help you build positive habits, shift your self-talk, reframe your negative thoughts, and generally feel better in your daily life. So many incredible options from the most knowledgeable experts in the world, along with renowned meditation teachers. You can also check out my 7-minute daily series to help you live more mindfully each and every day. Right now, listeners of On Purpose get 40% off a subscription to Calm Premium at calm.com/J. That's calm.com/JAY for 40% off. Calm your mind, change your life. We say we want those things, but when we experience it in reality, a lot of people will say, oh, they're so kind, they're so sweet, but they're boring. And then the other person who's not kind and sweet, they're exhilarating. It's a really weird contrast in how we say we want someone who's kind, we want someone who's thoughtful, but then when we experience that in reality, it's not fun. There's no chemistry, there's no spark, right? And then we often go for the person who's not kind, not nurturing, not empathetic. What I'm getting at here is
the #1 health and wellness podcast.
Jay Shetty.
Jay Shetty.
The one, the only Jay Shetty.
Hey everyone, welcome back to On Purpose. I'm your host, Jay Shetty. Thank you so much for turning up for yourself, for turning up to the On Purpose show. I am so grateful that you're here with me right now. Now, if you're single and you're trying to figure out how to find your person, this episode is for you. If you're recently single and you're trying to figure out what's going wrong, what mistakes am I making, this episode is for you. And even if you're dating someone, even if you're married, but you're trying to figure out how to deepen your connection, how to understand more, maybe you're even questioning whether you're with the right person, this episode is for you. I want to dive in to some really interesting research today. And the research comes from the Pew Research Center. And it talks about what men most value in women and what women most value in men. Now, I have to come clean with you to start off with. Last night, my wife, my brother-in-law, and my sister-in-law made me watch my first ever episode of Love Island. I think it's season 6 of the USA version of the show. I'd never watched an episode before in my life. And again, today's episode is not inspired by that by any means, but it was just fascinating to me as to how after years and years of research, technological advancement, and everything else, and even just seeing what works and what doesn't work, what we focus on about other people is so limited and so limiting. And it led me to go down this rabbit hole when I was thinking about this episode today and researching for the episode and asking myself, what is it that we say is most important to us in a potential partner? But then how do we get carried away with what we're attracted to? Right, let me say that again. What is the difference between what we say is important to us in a partner, and then how do we get carried away with what we get attracted to? And I think what I was originally thinking about was this idea that we almost know what's good for us, but we want what's bad for us, right? We know what's good for us, but we'll ignore all of that if there's something attractive, if there's something shiny, if there's something exciting, if there's something invigorating. We're willing to give up all of our good common sense. Now, let's actually look at the research. This was, what traits or characteristics do you think people in our society are most attracted to? So what do you think men value most in women? Number one thing that came out. What do you think it is? It was 35% said physical attractiveness is the most important thing they value in a woman. I'm not surprised by that. And I think you hear that a lot. You see that a lot. I think that has led to so many challenges in our society where there's so much pressure on appearance. There's so many enhancements of appearance. Like, it all becomes about that. Now, when women were asked what they most value in men, what do you think that was? 33% said honesty and morality. Now, that's a really interesting one, because I think you end up watching videos on TikTok and on social media and you see everyone talking about how the height is the most important thing. The bank balance is the most important thing, which we'll get to in a second. We're talking about who's paying on the first date. It's really interesting what cultural conversations spiral online versus what we say in a questionnaire. And I feel like there's a disconnect there. I think what's really interesting to me is you could go down this list and have someone tick a lot of it and then find them, not that you find them unattractive, but they don't tick this really artificial box. Like, someone's height doesn't define the quality of your relationship. It just doesn't, right? It's almost like saying, I will drink a bottle of water because it's taller than the other bottle, but they both have the same amount of water in it. If you have two bottles and they both have 500 milliliters of water in it, but one's taller, one's shorter, you choose the taller one, but it doesn't change your experience of the water. It doesn't change your experience of drinking. It doesn't change the quality of the water within. And I think for so many of us who have been burned in relationships, who constantly feel that we're going after the wrong thing, how many of you can relate to that, where you keep saying, Jay, you know what? I just keep picking the wrong person. I keep tripping myself up. I know I keep making mistakes. It's because we're focusing on the taller bottle of water. So I want to ask you, what is your tall bottle of water, right? What is that trip up for you, right? What is that thing that keeps, like Muhammad Ali said, the pebble in your shoe, right? What is that keeps giving you that discomfort, that keeps tripping you up, that keeps making you make the wrong decision? Because we say one thing, but then we follow the other. I'm not saying that physical attractiveness is not important. I think you should be attracted to your person. But I think sometimes we create artificial, superficial, very limited and limiting criteria that doesn't really allow us to find love. And I think a lot of that criteria comes from what we were trained and conditioned to believe was attractive when we were younger. Right? When we were younger, we saw certain things on the front cover of magazines. We saw certain body types in movies and TV shows. We saw certain colors of skin that were exposed to through media. And we built up desires. We built up ideas and visions of what a person should be. But I think so often we're looking at criteria that doesn't impact the quality of the experience, which is bizarre. There's so many things in life where you would never assess it purely based on a superficial metric that doesn't change the experience of the product, right? Now, number 2 of what men most value in women, 30% said empathy, nurturing, kindness. Now, there's one thing I want to talk about because I see this a lot. I see this with friends. When a lot of men say nurturing, they often want a mum in their partner. I'm just going to put it out there. I had to say it because I think so many individuals struggle with growing up. And I think there's a lot of talk about women and daddy issues, but there's not a lot of talk about men and mummy issues. And it's this idea of I want someone who is nurturing, but in a very maternal way. Like I want them to take care of me. I want them to take care of the house. I want them to do what my mom did. I want them to cook. I want them to, and it's not just the gender roles, but there's this false expectation. And I think what's really interesting about that is a lot of people being naturally nurturing, naturally empathetic, naturally kind of see it as beautiful because it's a way of being needed. It's a way of being wanted. It's a way of being useful. But I think we have to really look at that in what we desire and what the other person is willing to deliver on. And again, I go back to it. Do we want a partner who's equal and excited and curious, or are we really looking for someone to take care of us? Because if we're looking for someone to take care of us, it ends up leading to the relationship we don't want. We then say, oh, well, they're not adventurous. Oh, well, they're not interesting. Oh, well, they're not passionate. And it's like, well, yeah, because they're mothering or fathering you. Right? If your partner is now your parent, you're not going to find them attractive after a while. You're not going to find them interesting after a while. You're going to find that they're annoying you, that they're on your case, that they're holding you accountable, all the things that you potentially are challenged by or resent in your parents, you now project that onto your partner. So when we say things like, I want someone to be empathetic, nurturing, kind, let's really look at what we mean by that. And I actually think, here's the thing. We say we want those things, but when we experience it in reality, a lot of people will say, oh, they're so kind, they're so sweet, but they're boring, right? And then the other person who's not kind and sweet, they're exhilarating. It's a really weird contrast in how we say we want someone who's kind, we want someone who's thoughtful, but then when we experience that in reality, it's not fun. There's no chemistry, there's no spark, right? And then we often go for the person who's not kind, not nurturing, not empathetic. What I'm getting at here is we know we want people of high character and high value. We want someone who has deep values. We want someone who has values like honesty, kindness, morality, nurturing. Both in men and women, we've seen honesty and morality top 1 for women wanting in men, and empathy, nurturing, kindness number 2 in women. You've got all these deep values that are right up there in what we want, but we're so easily shifted away from our values. So you're asking me, Jay, why is that? Why is it that I know what's good for me, but I choose what's bad for me? How many of you can relate to that? Jay, I know what's right for me, but why do I always choose what's wrong for me? It's interesting, isn't it? It's a trick of the mind. The mind has the ability to trick you. You know what's good for you, but you'll still choose what's bad for you. You know what's right for you, but you will choose what's wrong for you. This happens because we become clouded, our vision becomes blurred, and ultimately, love is blind. We get blinded by the chemicals of the spark and of attraction and of lust that literally blur our vision so that we now no longer see the unfavorable elements of that individual. This is true for the chemicals released during and after. This is true for when we first feel that chemical attraction to someone. We're actually emotionally vision impaired to notice the things about someone that actually matter. And I've partnered up with Match, which I'm really excited about, as their relationship advisor, because what I found is that dating apps are not the problem. The challenge is of what we're focused on and what we're looking at. If we don't understand our values and we don't understand the other person's values and they don't understand theirs and ours, it doesn't matter how many other boxes we tick. If you're truly in this for a successful relationship, if you're truly in this for a real deep partnership, I promise you, the artificial, superficial things are not going to be the ones that make a difference. Your values are, your knowledge, awareness, acceptance, and respect for someone's values are. So I want you to head over to match.com/J if you want to match people through value systems, through a deeper value connection. Again, I'm not saying I want you to be attracted to the person. I want you to think they're fun. I want you to be excited. But I want us to pivot and shift our mindset on, for a moment, deprioritizing the things that society, media, parents, and friends have told us to overvalue, and shift more emphasis onto the things we've been made to undervalue, like honesty, kindness, connection, empathy, these deep values that are so critical to the success of a relationship, right? And we do this with everything, right? Like, there'll be debates constantly between iPhone and Android users. People saying like, oh, well, Android is more customizable, iPhone's more the slickness. And again, we follow brand. And it's true, right? Like, Android does have, and Samsung phones do have more functionality, but we choose something that we think has a certain brand or whatever it may be. And it's interesting how when you start doing that in love, it has far bigger ramifications than with technology, right?
Hey, I'm Gianna Prudenti.
And I'm Janae Jackson Gadsden. We're the hosts of Let's Talk Offline, a new podcast from LinkedIn News and iHeart Podcasts.
When you're just starting out in your career, you have a lot of questions, like, how do I speak up when I'm feeling overwhelmed?
Or, can I negotiate a higher salary if this is my first real job? Girl, yes.
Each week, we answer your unfiltered work questions.
Think of us as your work besties you can turn to for advice.
And if we don't know the answer, we bring in experts who do, like resume specialist Morgan Sanner.
The only difference between the person who doesn't get the job and the person who gets the job is usually who applies.
Yeah, I think a lot about that quote. What is it? Like, you miss 100% of the shots you never take?
Yeah, rejection is scary, but it's better than you rejecting yourself.
Together, we'll share what it really takes to thrive in the early years of your career,
without sacrificing your sanity or sleep.
Listen to Let's Talk Offline on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey, I'm Jack Beast Thomas, the host of a brand new Black Effect original series, Black Lit, the podcast for diving deep into the rich world of Black literature. I'm Jack Beast Thomas, and I'm inviting you to join me and a vibrant community of literary enthusiasts dedicated to protecting and celebrating our stories. Black Lit is for the page turners, for those who listen to audiobooks while commuting or running errands, for those who find themselves seeking solace, wisdom, and refuge between the chapters. From thought-provoking novels to powerful poetry, we'll explore the stories that shape our culture. Together, we'll dissect classics and contemporary works while uncovering the stories of the brilliant writers behind them. Blacklit is here to amplify the voices of Black writers and to bring their words to life. Listen to Blacklit on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hi, I'm Essie Cupp, and I have spent the last 20 plus years knee-deep in politics and the news. I've covered some really tough subjects, from war to genocide to 6 presidential elections, way too much Trump. And you know what? I need a break, like a mental health break from the news, from the triggering headlines. And I kind of suspect some of you listening out there might need a break too. So my new podcast is going to be just that, a fun and loose space where I talk to my famous friends and people I admire about all the stuff that consumes us when we're not consumed by politics.
I did not really rebel in the 60s. I had no sex in the 70s.
What?
I made no money in the 80s. So when true crime came along, I missed that trend too.
So many great guests are joining me, from Josh Mankiewicz to Larry Wilmore to Molly Jong-Fast to Josh Gad.
I'm so excited that you have this platform, and I am just like hoping that I don't destroy the platform in its earliest stages.
Listen to Off the Cuff on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your favorite shows.
Number 2 of what women want in men, 23% said professional financial success. And I want to call out, this has caused a lot of stress and pressure for a lot of friends, a lot of good men, because I think we're again living in a society where people are exposed to a world online of fast cars, jewelry, you've got their high-flying life, and it can become quite intimidating and quite challenging for people to think they have to live up to that. And I know a lot of good, hardworking, honest men that are trying their best, that are passionate about what they do, that care about what they do, but they're being undervalued. And I always like sharing this because to me, it makes a huge difference. When I met Radhi, materially, I didn't have anything. And Radhi chose to be with me at a time when I was still trying to pay off my student debt and I didn't even have a job. And I don't even thought she knew if I would ever get anywhere externally to a certain level. But I think the point was I had someone who believed in me and saw that I wanted to grow. And I think I want to point that out here, which comes third for women, which is 19% ambition and leadership, women wanting in men, is that I truly believe that ambition is something that is better to look for than already achieved financial success. Someone who already has financial success may want to pivot. They may even want to quit their job to try something. By the way, someone else who hasn't made it, especially when you met someone young, they need to have time. And if that person feels pressure rather than belief, chances are they'll buckle. Now, the other thing I'd like to point out is whether you're a man or woman, these are all themes that I think are across the board. For me, if you're looking for someone who's ambitious, you've also got to understand from a value point of view what that trait is. So if you want someone ambitious, chances are they won't be available all the time, right? You can't have someone ambitious and available. It doesn't work that way. And I think a lot of us will want someone who's ambitious, but then we'll say why they're not available, right? We'll say we want someone who's successful, but then we're saying, well, why are they not messaging me? Why are they not available this weekend? Why are they not up for hanging out? And it's like, well, they're not living spontaneous. They're living structured. So we also have to understand the value that we want in someone. How does that value show up in reality? I think we almost have these very one-dimensional views of values, right? Our one-dimensional view of ambition is, someone who has goals, someone who has dreams, but then we want them to have dreams, but then we want them to never work on their dreams because we want them to be around, right? It doesn't add up. And I think we can have these very limited and limiting views of what a true goal looks like. Now, the third thing that men look for in women, 22% said intelligence. And again, by the way, I am calling out all sides of it because it's so interesting to me. I have a lot of incredibly successful female friends who are doing amazing entrepreneurs, building incredible companies, doing phenomenal stuff. And they actually feel like their intelligence is intimidating. They feel like their ambition is intimidating. And a lot of them feel like they have to kind of lower themselves or lower their standards or make themselves feel less smart, less thoughtful, less accomplished in order to attract someone. Let me say this, your partner who cares about you, who values you, will admire your success. Now, I think there's a difference also between admiring and being a fan. And I think admiration is healthier than fandom. I think if someone's a big fan of yours, it's hard to be a partner. And sometimes we say, oh, my partner's my number one fan. I want to be their number fan. I mean, to be honest, I'd probably even say I'm Radhi's number one fan. And maybe I should take back my statement now because I'm like, yeah, I am Radhi's number one fan. What am I talking about? But I think the idea that there's an admiration for what you do and there's a respect for what you do, but you have to have that back for them, whatever they decide to be or whatever they decide to do. And so if you are someone who feels like your success intimidates people or your success, makes people feel uncomfortable, chances are you're just speaking to the wrong people because you shouldn't have to play down your success. I know someone who constantly started to play down their success whenever they were around someone to date them. They complained about their life. They did all those things. And then someone left them because they said they were too negative. Now, this person wasn't negative at all. So just imagine that for a second. You're a positive, high-functioning, high performer. Then in order to make yourself more relatable, you start talking about your bad experiences and what's going wrong. And then that person leaves you not because you're intimidating, but because they see you as uninteresting and complaining and negative. And so I think you don't want to become someone you're not. And there's this beautiful quote that I read from Arlen Was Here the other day on Twitter. And it said, be yourself so that the people looking for you can find you. And I think that's what that patience needs to be, that I don't have to make myself smaller in order to have a big experience of love. I don't have to make myself less significant in order to find a significant other. Let me say that again. You don't have to make yourself less significant to find a significant other, because a significant other will recognize your significance and celebrate it. Now, I want to go down this list for you so you know. So what women value most in men, 19% said strength and toughness, 18% said hard work, good work ethic, 11% said physical attractiveness, 11% said empathy, nurturing, kindness, 9% said loyalty, dependability, 8% said intelligence, 5% said being family-oriented, and 5% said politeness, respectfulness. Notice how a relationship is made up of loyalty, politeness, respectfulness, but those only make up 14%.